Good day, Professor Myron Belfer. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation to speak to us. I must let you know that, we have had the opportunity of having great past presidents of the IACAPAP that had huge vision. I suspect most of what you dreamed to happen may have happened. Some of what you dreamed to happen has not yet happened. So we just think this is an opportunity to grab you aside for a few minutes to enlighten us. My name is Yewande Oshodi. I'm the current Secretary General of IACAPAP, and I'm honored and privileged to be speaking to Professor Myron Belfer today. You're welcome, Professor Belfer.
I'm very happy to be here today, Yewande. I know you when you were a young person.
Yes, you did.
Working in IACAPAP, so it's wonderful to see you as Secretary General. So I can tell you something about myself. In other words,
Yes, please.
I never started off to be a psychiatrist. In other words, I
Oh, really?
wanted to be a research person, and I was
Okay.
in stress and neuroendocrinology. In fact, I studied neuroendocrinology. But in my era, in other words, there were limited opportunities unless you wanted to get a PhD. And
Hmm.
so I ended up doing psychiatry so that I could pursue some research on stress. That's how
Okay.
I never wanted to be an adult psychiatrist. I didn't do much reading in psychiatry, but I was interested in child psychiatry. And
Hmm.
so that's actually how I ended up
So
being a,
research got you into psychiatry, and then you decided to do child psychiatry. Is that correct?
yeah, always wanted to be a child psychiatrist, never an adult,
Okay.
never. I had an interest in stress and
Hmm.
maternal fetal interactions. So,
Okay. Prof, let
uh,
me ask, can you remind us what years you were president of IACAPAP?
That's a good question because I was trying to think, and to tell you the truth, I think it was in the early 2000s. In other words, I think
Okay.
around 2003. But I was
Okay.
in Yakapap for many years before that. Uh,
Yes.
so I
How
should.
long ago have you been in the IACAPAP? Maybe we could just take it from there.
I started in Yakapap in the 70s. In other words, and when Irving Phillips was the president of Yakapap and William Ayers was the treasurer of Yakapap, and
Hmm.
Harry Schleimer was the secretary general. And
Okay.
what happened was that William Ayers became uh, president of American Academy of Child Psychiatry. He stepped down, and he knew me from the American Academy where I was active, and asked if I wanted to be treasurer. No election,
Hmm.
you know.
Okay.
Do it. Do you want to do it? Yes, I do. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
That was an exciting time for Yakapap because it was transitioning from the time when it was basically a club. So a lot of professors from Europe and from Asia and from United
Hmm.
States used to go on junkets. They used to go traveling to different places and they would do a seminar. I think in many
Okay.
the travel was the incentive and the teaching was secondary. But who
But it
knows?
does look like the seminars seem to have evolved into the Congress we have today. Would that
That's
be correct?
that's that's right. So,
Okay.
but many things intervened in between there. So early on, after I became treasurer, the wall came down in Eastern Europe, and
Mm.
that was the beginning of initiatives in Yakapap that saw Yakapap take on a new life as supporting education for various groups of people. Yakapap
Mm.
did wonderful seminars in Eastern Europe under the leadership
Mm.
of Kari Schleimer, uh,
Okay.
Hungary, in Czech Republic, Bulgaria, all over Eastern Europe. And
Mm.
many of the people who participated in that became active in Yakapap and
Hmm.
became my friends. And to this
Okay.
day, and I think
Okay.
that was very important. After that, Yakapap felt that it had a role in global child mental health education. Before that, its primary product were yearly textbooks that were authored by such famous people as Colette Gillon, Pierre
Mhm.
Marie, E. James Anthony, and those textbooks, became a valuable resource.
Hmm. Would
Later
you,
on,
how would you describe, okay, please go on. I had a burning question, but please go on. Finish.
ask your
I was
question.
going to say, how would you compare the IACAPAP of then to what we have today? I know you spoke about it being like a club initially, and then it's gotten into a bit more research and education and stuff like that. But are there other ways in which you could possibly compare them?
It was
Compare
much
it?
small. It was much smaller. Everyone
Okay.
knew everyone. In other words, and the meetings were smaller, but it had a very strong focus on training. In other words, and it was in fact very psychodynamically oriented. In other words, I would say
Mm,
most of its training was along that line. There was less understanding of or focus on the brain, on a broader understanding
mhm,
of psychiatry.
mhm,
And
mm,
so it moved once it established itself as the training group. It reached out to other areas. In the executive committee, people said, "Well, where else are there needs for training?" In other words,
mm,
people started to invite members of IACAPAP to do training after the success in Eastern Europe. And IACAPAP itself expanded its membership. It took on more national organizations as members of IACAPAP. That was not the
mhm.
case at the very beginning. Uh,
Okay.
it
Mm,
also it also took on a political dimension because there was the assassination of a member that people do not remember. There was a Tunisian child psychiatrist,
okay.
Busepsi. He was assassinated because of his more liberal views at that time. And people had an awakening of the political dimension of child mental health, child psychiatry. And I think
Mm,
that fueled people to be more interested in serving people who were at risk. And so we
mm,
had a number of groups that affiliated themselves with IACAPAP. We started to have psychiatrists from Palestine, who participated from other parts of the world under the leadership of Donald Cohn, who was a
yes.
wonderful child psychiatrist, unique. Okay, I think
Mm,
all of the field of child psychiatry would be different today if he had lived longer. Uh,
no.
but he opened the door to Egypt, and Amira Seyfeldin and her group promoted child mental health throughout the region. Uh,
Mhm,
John Fayyad was in Lebanon. He became a very active member of IACAPAP and did a lot for education. Then,
mm,
after working in the Eastern Mediterranean region, we met a young woman by the name of Olienka Omigboden,
okay.
who came to a IACAPAP meeting as a fellow, and
Yes.
she was spectacular. She gave a speech at the closing of one of the sessions, and people said, "Wow, who is this woman?" And to make a long story much shorter, Olienka became a driving force for child mental health in Africa. She,
Mm,
along with yourself and others, developed child mental health in parts of the world that at the beginning of IACAPAP could not have been imagined. I think
mm,
Petrus de Vries in Africa and South Africa developed research, but Olienka and yourself and others in the group developed training. In other words, that has
mm,
had a lasting impact in
yes.
the region, and
Yes.
that was I think one of the greatest achievements was the identification of Olienka and the support for the training in Africa.
So
IACAPAP.
it sounds very much like training, and the global reach of IACAPAP has been one piece that has been consistent over the years.
Yes, and then fortuitously, I went to work at the World Health Organization in Geneva, and
Yes.
I brought with me the knowledge of IACAPAP. So
Okay.
I was able to involve members of IACAPAP in many of the deliberations of the World Health Organization. So
Okay.
as a result of that, we identified people in China and in
Okay.
Indonesia and in other parts of the world. They not only became part of the WHO consulting group, but they became active participants in WHO. So Yi Zheng,
Hmm.
in other words, from
Yeah.
Beijing,
Okay.
Wen Cheng from Shanghai, and many others became active in IACAPAP. And for many decades now, we've always had a representative from China on the executive committee of IACAPAP. So
Hmm.
IACAPAP went from being a much more insular group to being a truly international group.
Yes.
And
And
then
the beauty is that that has been sustained over the years.
that's right. And Salvador Celia in South America was active, and he brought along Luis Roja, who's now the
Hmm.
president, and other people. So gradually, from it, the IACAPAP grew as a result of the work of its members and to
Hmm.
be there. I'm very proud of IACAPAP for keeping its focus. I think it's kept its focus on children and
It
some of the
has.
most vulnerable children. It has not veered off into overly biological understanding of children, but still respects the impact of the environment on the mental health life of children and supports trainees. The Helmut Remschmidt Seminar,
Hmm.
the Donald Cohn Fellowship have done tremendous things to promote child mental health worldwide.
I wonder what thoughts would do you think early career professionals should should focus on as child and adolescent mental health experts? I mean, from your privileged position of being a psychiatrist, child psychiatrist of many years, you've seen many things come and go. You've seen the issues in the world today. For young upcoming professionals in the field, early career, what would you advise? What words of advice would you be giving them?
I think it's very tempting to become overly scientific, quote unquote. In other words,
Hmm.
I think that the important thing is to keep an understanding of the role of the family and of the environment on children. I remember to this day, I took a case conference in China, and through translation, uh,
Hmm.
we went through various diagnoses, and then I asked to speak to the child. I interviewed the child, and it turns out that the child was being seen for behavioral problems. I
Hmm.
asked the child what's going on. He said, "Well, my parents are getting divorced." Up until the time the child said his parents were getting divorced, no one mentioned
Wow.
the stress in the family. So that was a powerful lesson, even in a setting where I had limited understanding of the language. And I think
Hmm.
that continues. The stresses that kids have now with displacement,
Hmm.
with observing horrible things happening in their
Hmm.
environments, that can't help but have an impact. And
Hmm.
I believe that child psychiatrists have an obligation to be mindful of that
Yeah.
as much as they need to be mindful of the genetic component of various
Yeah.
kinds of disorders.
Yeah. Hmm.
I
So,
should mention, I just
yes,
want to
please.
mention one thing. We talked about the HRRS seminar,
HRS.
but we should mention that that's Helmut Remschmidt. That's in honor of
Yes.
Helmut Remschmidt, who
Helmet
was the president,
Rem Schmidt
who did a tremendous
research seminars.
who did a
Yes, that's
tremendous amount for
HRS. Yes.
IACAP, right?
Yes,
So,
and
so
he was a past president of IACAPAP
yes,
also,
yes, of
and
course.
he will be granting an interview too. So we're honored with that legacy that Helmut Remschmidt,
Right,
has be bequested, the IACAPAP with over the years with the
right.
HRRS seminar. Um, I mean, you said what early career professionals should watch out for. It shouldn't be too much of the biology. Biology is important, but we should always remember the stress and these other factors. Are there any innovations that you think um, you find impressive that has evolved over time that you also would recommend that we keep an eye on? That may be something useful for the field of child and adolescent psychiatry and professionals in the field.
Well, I think out of necessity, we've learned about the issue of task shifting in its various forms. I think Africa actually has been a leader in this regard
Mm-hmm.
in terms of some of the efforts that it's accomplished involving families, involving home care, involving
Mm-hmm.
the bench, various kinds of innovative attempts.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that stands out. I know that there have been various biological findings that are important,
Yeah.
but I don't think there's a single medication out there or necessarily a image that one can point to as having revolutionized
Yeah.
child psychiatry or child mental health.
So issues around task shifting, engaging the community and the family in the course of care for these young persons should be something.
Right. The other area where IACAPAP has played a big role, and I think is remarkably different than when I was started out, is that there's much more awareness of child mental health and child mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the agenda at the
Yeah.
United Nations. It's on the agenda in many countries. Places like China are devoting huge resources to support child mental health.
Mm.
This did not exist when I started. In other words, it was
So yeah,
very insular, and
yeah. So that's part of the impact of ICAPAP,
I,
globally
I
also.
believe it is. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, as a past president, what would you say would be your leadership reflections, things you think you achieved? You may have mentioned some of them already, but I'll just probably repeat it. And then things you probably wish could have been better or challenges. Can you share some thoughts around that for us, with us?
Well, I'm very proud of having identified some young people who became real leaders. So, as I mentioned, Olienka
Yes.
and Wen Hong, but there are many others. In other words, around the world, in the Czech Republic and elsewhere, who've emerged as leaders in child mental health. I think that
Mm.
is the most satisfying thing for me.
Mm.
The second is some of the work we did at WHO on highlighting the needs for child mental health. We point through the Atlas program at
Mm.
WHO. We identified concretely for the first time what the gap is in terms of services for children.
Mm.
That was
Mm.
very important and continues to be important.
Mhm. And that was a very important resource that
And
came out of WHO for the world and child and adolescent mental health. Yeah.
right. So,
Mm.
um, I'm proud of the fact that Yakapap has stood up through its statements uh, for on behalf of the well-being of children and their families. So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's a role for Yakapap.
Okay. So you've mentioned a few of the many things you've done. So as a person who has your career as a child psychiatrist in the university where you worked for many years, this role in the IACAPAP or involvement in IACAPAP, I imagine it contributed to your personal growth and career growth in
Oh,
some ways. Yeah. Would you want to tell
absolutely.
us a bit? Yes.
Absolutely. I don't have too many friends, and most of them are in Yakapap.
Oh wow.
So for me, it's been a great opportunity to meet people and to be involved with them. And as I say, I've known them lifelong. In other words, in relation to the work of Yakapap, and
Mhm.
it's been very important for me.
So it looks like the association has made your life richer in many ways.
Undoubtedly, yes.
So just when the viewers think about ICAPAP, it becomes a tool beyond even the child mental health work we do, but it influences our lives.
I think it's been a major support for a lot of people, in other words, throughout the world. And we live in more metropolitan areas now, but in
Hmm.
many countries there are only two or three, were child psychiatrists, and YACAPAP
Hmm.
provides a framework for them to think about the profession.
Mm. Okay, if I may ask you concerning legacy and vision, what you wish you could still see from the IACAPAP, in the future, or also what you think you've left as some legacy, following and I know you've spoken about finding, new, leaders and seeing
Right.
them evolve as some of the, things you're pleased. I mean, it could be that, or is there something else you feel is part of a legacy that, your term as president left the IACAPAP with and your vision for the IACAPAP going forward? So it's like two questions in one, about legacy and then
Yeah.
about vision. I'm sorry. I need to
Yeah,
ask you all the
that's
questions.
okay. I think that if there is a legacy, it's to preserve what I think is unique about Yakapap, which is the fact that it has, in many ways, more of a feeling of an extended family, even though it has professionals who are part of it. The personal relationships in Yakapap have always been very important. And I hope that as a position will continue. In other words, that
Mm,
second is the focus on the child. In other words,
mm,
uh, industry has played a small role in the development of Yakapap. There was, in fact, a time which should be acknowledged when Eli Lilly gave Yakapap a lot of money,
mm,
uh, and that was very helpful. But Yakapap did not become dependent in the same way. So I
mm.
think that being able to exist on its own, have some independence of thought, is
Yes.
very important.
Yes. I think that's an amazing detail there. So family, it becomes kind of extended family. I find that profound. I remember in 2010 when I came to Boston,
Right.
Children's Hospital, as a very young psychiatrist, and I had the privilege of, observing with you.
Right.
And that was a singular pivotal moment for me in becoming, deciding to become a child psychiatrist.
Right.
So, and we've been in touch for years. So I'm a living example, proof of that. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yes. Thank you, Prof. So, as we begin to round up, I just wonder if you have any other final thoughts, for upcoming child and adolescent mental health professionals or upcoming executives of the association. Just any final thoughts or burning thoughts you've had in your heart that you wish someone would just, consider, think about, use. Yeah.
Well, the world actually, although I didn't think it at the time, the world has become increasingly difficult, not easier. In other words,
Hmm.
especially for children. There are many stresses on children that didn't exist a long time ago. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be different. I thought life was going to get easier. But instead, I think from the perspective of someone looking at children and their lives today, uh, between the social pressures, the communication pressures with social media, the world situation is so stressful now that Yakapap has a very important role to highlight what the stresses are on children and in every way possible to find some way to lessen the stress, to intervene, to highlight what the problems are, and that's really really important.
Mm.
Yakapop may be able to do more in the area of policy and advocacy, and I think it should
Mm.
keep a focus on that.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think these are important signposts that you give the IACAPAP, to utilize as it goes on into the future. Two more questions and I round up.
Sure.
The one I'm going to ask now has to do with money. I remember the last you recently were gracious enough to support the IACAPAP with a seed grant, and
Yeah.
that allowed members to match that grant to be able to raise some
Yeah.
funds for the IACAPAP. Are there any thoughts about funding? Because IACAPAP is, it's not a business organization. We rely a lot on donations and stuff like that. Are there maybe thoughts or strategies you think can be used in supporting the IACAPAP to fund its programs, the educational programs and training sessions, and all the funding issues that we require.
I wish I knew. I was disappointed, quite frankly, in the level of the match. In other words, I was expecting it was going to cost me a lot more than it did.
You wish we had done better, matched you much
Yes,
more.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we'll try. We'll keep
And
trying.
I think the newest initiative, which is a more focused fundraising around the Helmut Remschmidt Fellowship,
Programs and done
Donald
all.
Fellows,
Hmm.
maybe that will draw out more money.
Yes.
Second, which is a big disappointment for me and something I cannot understand, is that there are many members of IACAPAP who are not necessarily wealthy, but certainly have substantial resources, and they haven't stepped up. Okay.
Mm.
So whether that would be different if there were more naming opportunities, if there were something else, but it seems to me that of all the causes that I know about that could be supported, Yakapap really should be high on the list. And
Mm.
I don't know why it isn't. And it would be
Mm.
interesting to ask that question of the membership.
Okay. Okay. So, well, I think the team will take a close look at what you've said and try and look at new things that can be done or improve on what's going on. And we are excited for the new strategy going on currently with the specific programs. Hopefully, we'll get some traction with
Right.
that. Okay, so maybe any final thoughts as we bring this to a close?
Oh, well, Yakapap has been a very important part of my life. And I think that it could be a very important part of the lives of many, many other child mental health professionals, not just child psychiatrists, but all the allied professions as well. And so I hope that Yakapap will find a way to continue in a very difficult environment. In other words, so we cannot take for granted the fact that Yakapap will survive, in other words, the way it
Mhm.
has. And I hope that people who are involved will continue to support it. In other words,
Mm.
it's a wonderful support for individuals who have no other context in which to understand their professional lives.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's been great for me. So I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much. So, Professor Myron Belfer, on behalf of the current Bureau of the ICAPAP and the Executive Committee of ICAPAP, I want to say a big thank you for taking out time to speak to us, sharing from your memories, from your heart, from your experiences regarding ICAPAP, and we wish you all the very best. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you very much. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.